Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Belle Jarneski, and I am the Executive Director of the Jewish Heritage Center. I am so thrilled to welcome you to this important event tonight to inaugurate the new vision of the Freeman Family Foundation Holocaust Education Center, the only Holocaust museum in our province. Tonight, we are here to celebrate the realization of a dream, the completion of a totally renovated Holocaust Education Center that will take us into the future, preserving the important stories of our survivors, providing an important educational opportunity for students and the broader public, and in turn, protecting the facts and combating distortion. At this time, I would like to recognize the presence of some very special guests joining us tonight. The Honorable Anita Neville, Lieutenant Governor of Manitoba, and a longtime member of the Jewish Heritage Center Board of Directors. The Honorable Erwin Kotler, Canada's Envoy on Holocaust Remembrance and Combating Anti-Semitism, who will be joining us from Israel. Mr. Peter Flegel, Executive Director of Canadian Heritage's Anti-Racism Secretariat. The Honorable Andrew Smith, Minister of Sport, Culture and Heritage. Janice Lukes, Deputy Mayor of the City of Winnipeg. And John Gerard, MLA for River Heights, is also in our audience tonight. And of course, our precious survivors. We are so honored by your presence with us tonight. Our museum is unique. All the precious artifacts in the exhibits belonged to local Holocaust survivors and their families. The museum's very existence is thanks to the local survivor community, whose vision a quarter of a century ago was to have a place where students and the broader community could come to learn about this tragic chapter of human history and its implications for the present and the future. Since then, so much has changed. Nearly 80 years since the end of World War II, the memory of the Holocaust is under siege through denial, distortion, and conspiracy theories. The youngest of our survivors, those few children who survived the inferno, are now nearing 98 years of age, and many who were in their teens at the time of the Shoah are now in their late 90s. We have a responsibility to preserve these important stories for years to come. And the renovated museum is a tribute to our survivors, to their courage, and for their many contributions to our community. When you get a chance to visit, as you enter, you'll see a projection of the names of the approximately 1,050 survivors who settled in Winnipeg, facing you on the back wall. And these names will play on a continuous loop that automatically begins when you enter the space. The stories of our survivors, however, did not begin with the Shoah. They came from different countries and a variety of backgrounds. They had families. Some families were religious, others secular. The entrance window to the museum showcases their lives before the Holocaust with magnificent photos and artifacts, such as the beautiful Stammbaum donated by Ralph Stern, a family tree dating back to late 16th century Germany. The beautiful accordion belonging to the Rubin family of musical prodigies in France. And these are just two examples. A computer kiosk will connect visitors to the USC Shoah Foundation's Visual History Archive and its more than 55,000 video testimonies of the Holocaust survivors, including the interviews the Jewish Heritage Center filmed, and a list of 1.9 million searchable names. The Jewish Heritage Center is the only full access site to the Visual History Archive between Toronto and Calgary. Inside the museum, the exhibit reflects advances in the best practices in Holocaust museology, education, and research findings. Technology has become an essential element of Holocaust museums today, attracting the interest of young people and also allowing for the integration of a large collection of materials. And with that in mind, the Jewish Heritage Center, with the help of the team at Pattern Interactive, has created an interactive table featuring stories and photographs that trace the lives of local survivors before, during, and after the Holocaust. An overview of the Holocaust also includes maps and historical photos. And we have also included an often ignored element, and that is the history of anti-Semitism in Canada from the 1920s to the present time. The physical exhibit, beautifully designed by guest curator Candace Hogue, features some never-before displayed pieces from our collection. And extraordinary new pieces and extensive collections were added as a result of our call for artifacts as we began this project. I'd like to thank Candace for her creative and thoughtful work creating this exhibit. I'd also like to thank Jeremy Choi and his team at Pattern Interactive for understanding and rendering our vision through the wonders of modern technology. The interactive table, the survivor names projection, and the computer kiosk have allowed us to integrate a very large collection of materials from our impressive archive. And last but not least, I thank Stan Carboni, our Director of Programs and Exhibits, and Andrew Morrison, our archivist, who have worked so hard for the last 3 years translating our dream into a reality. It has been such a pleasure to work with you all. We are grateful to the agencies that funded this project: Canadian Heritage, the Province of Manitoba, the Asper Foundation, the Azrieli Foundation, the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba, the Winnipeg Foundation, the Manitoba Arts Council, and many kind and generous donors. Now, after the presentation, there will be a reception in the Caney Foyer. And I'm thrilled to say that there are probably, well, definitely, far too many of you here tonight to fit into the space of the museum all at once tonight. You know, there are those pesky fire code laws. But we invite you to visit the Holocaust Education Center at your leisure, whether tonight or at any other time that the Asper campus is open, which is from 6 a.m. until 9 p.m., to explore and discover this very meaningful tribute to our survivors. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mark Cantor, President of the Board of Directors of the Jewish Heritage Center, who will bring greetings on behalf of the board and acknowledge territory.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening. It's so nice to see all of you here tonight. It's a pleasure on such a wonderful evening like this, a special evening. I want to start by recognizing and acknowledging that we are on ancestral lands on Treaty 1 territory. The Red River Valley is also the birthplace of the Métis. We acknowledge that the water from this site is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. We affirm that our commitment to never forget must also include confronting attempts to destroy Indigenous culture and nationhood, and condemning attempts to deny that historical reality. It's been such a pleasure to be president of the Jewish Heritage Center over the last several years, and to work and to meet with so many wonderful people. The Jewish Heritage Center plays a significant and pivotal role in preserving and promoting our Jewish heritage. Our mission includes serving as an advocate for anti-racism and providing education on the Holocaust. the Jewish Heritage Center has become the principal purveyor of education on the Holocaust. I've had the opportunity this evening, I've had a sneak peek at the museum, and I trust all of you will have an opportunity to go and see it. It truly is impressive, inspiring. I truly was left in awe after Bell gave me a little bit of a tour. The technology, and it's a wonderful, saddening, but important experience, I think, for all of us to go through. And I promised I would be very brief. I just want to give some extra thanks. Bell has already thanked many people, but I do want to give some extra thanks to individuals, Andrew Morrison, the archivist at the Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada, Stan Carboni, the Programs and Exhibit Director, of course, Candace Hogue, the curator, who I echo Bell's comments. She did such a wonderful job on the design. It is quite beautiful. And finally, of course, Bell Jarnewski, for Executive Director of the Jewish Heritage Center, all for doing such a wonderful job. Thank you. Enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Mark. And also bringing greetings tonight is Gustavo Zentner, President of the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg. We at the Jewish Heritage Center are very grateful to the Federation for their support of us throughout the year, without which we could not continue our important work.
Thank you, Bell. Good evening. My name is Gustavo Zentner, and it is truly an honor for me to join here with you tonight on behalf of the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg and all of you as we celebrate the opening of this phenomenal exhibit. I would honestly like to highlight the leadership and the work that took to get us to this evening. I'd like to first acknowledge the presence of Her Honor, Lieutenant Governor of Manitoba, Anita Neville, who has, through her leadership over the years, enabled a lot of the activities. And in doing so, to acknowledge the presence of our government representatives, other dignitaries, and representatives of the civic community. I believe that the work that we're going to experience tonight is solely based on memory and a deep understanding that the pictures of the people and the artifacts that are being displayed are today being displayed for the wrong reason. These were people that were going by on their day-to-day lives until a very small evil portion of society turned against them, and in doing so, taught humanity to turn against each other. And there should be no more room in the years to come, in generations to come, for hatred and for people of any belief to challenge and deny any nation's independence and the truth of Holocaust. So the Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada has come together with a number of professionals under the leadership of Mark Cantor as the chairman of the board and Bel Jarnewski as executive director. I'd like to join in with the entire community to thank them, as well as Stan Carboni, for their tireless efforts in making sure that we have an exhibit that we can be proud of, and more importantly, that we can promote for generations to come. I'm thrilled to see many young people joining on tonight, and my wish is that their fingerprints will be all over their exhibit and on the touch screens. I denounce the increase of anti-Semitism online and in person. And that's what we're here to do tonight, to join in at a very local level on this global fight of increased anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. And I invite you to join me tonight with the efforts of the Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada in putting together an exhibit that not only intends to educate, but to also highlight the memory and the positive attitudes of those people that fell prey of hatred. I'd like to acknowledge once again the presence of our youth, and more importantly, our precious survivors in making this event possible tonight. Thank you for joining in.
The Honourable Irwin Cotler, former Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada, is the Prime Minister's Special Envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. He also heads our Canadian delegation to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IRA, and it has been a true honor to work with him these last few years. Now, Professor Cotler is currently in Israel, where it's just after 3 a.m., but he has generously recorded a keynote address for us in honor of this occasion.
Forum this evening, on the occasion also of the official rededication of the Freeman Family Holocaust Education Center, itself inspired by the community of Holocaust survivors. And I'm honored and humbled to be amongst you and joined also by my colleague and friend, Peter Flegel, the Executive Director of the Canadian Government's Anti-Racism Secretariat. Indeed, we meet at a historic moment of remembrance and reminder, of bearing witness, of taking action, of learning and acting upon the lessons of the Holocaust, the lessons of history. For we meet on the eve of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, marking the 78th anniversary of the liberation of the death camp Auschwitz, the most brutal extermination camp of the 20th century. Itself remembrance and reminder of horrors too terrible to be believed, but not too terrible to have happened. And we meet also in the wake of the 78th anniversary of the arrest and disappearance of Raoul Wallenberg, Canada's first honorary citizen, hero of humanity, who demonstrated how one person with the compassion to care and the courage to act can confront evil, prevail, and transform history. It remains a tragedy that this hero of the Holocaust, who saved so many, was not saved by so many who could. And we, the countries of Raoul Wallenberg's honorary citizenship, indeed the international community, owe Raoul Wallenberg, his family, and all those saved by this hero of humanity, a duty to secure truth and justice and accountability regarding his fate. We meet also amidst the international drumbeat of evil, of Russia's criminal aggression in Ukraine, accompanied by ongoing war crimes and crimes against humanity, of China's assault on the rules-based order, of mass atrocities targeting the Uyghurs and Rohingya, Afghans, and the increasing imprisonment of human rights defenders and the culture of impunity accompanying it. We need to learn from and act upon the life and legacy of Raoul Wallenberg so as to help us build a democratic, just, and accountable international community. And we meet also amidst a resurgence of global anti-Semitism. Of anti-Semitism as not only the oldest, longest, most enduring, and most lethal of hatreds, of one which mutates over time, but one grounded in one foundational, historic, generic trope, and that is of the Jews and the Jewish people as the enemy of all that is good and the embodiment of all that is evil. And so at this important historical inflection moment, we should ask ourselves, what is it that we have learned? And more importantly, what is it that we must do? Here with a summary of these universal lessons that need to be acted upon. The first is the danger of forgetting, where forgetting is killing the victims a second time, and the imperative, therefore, of remembrance, of zachor, of le devoir de mémoire, of the Holocaust, as Elie Wiesel would remind us again and again, as a war against the Jews in which not all victims were Jews, but all Jews were targeted victims, of Jews being defamed, dehumanized, and demonized as prologue and justification for their mass murder, of the mass murder of 6 million men, women, and children, not as a matter of abstract statistics, but as we say on such moments of remembrance as this evening, that unto each person there is a name. Each person is an identity. Each person is a universe. As the Talmud reminds us, if you save a single person, it is as if you have saved an entire universe, just as if you kill a single person, it is as if you have killed an entire universe. And so the abiding universal lesson to be acted upon, that we are each, wherever we are, the guarantors of each other's humanity. The second lesson is the danger of anti-Semitism, that if the Holocaust is a paradigm for radical evil, anti-Semitism is a paradigm for radical hate. As we meet, as I mentioned, on the 78th anniversary of the eve of the liberation of the death camp Auschwitz, let us remember that 1.3 million people were deported to the death camp Auschwitz. 1.1 million of them were Jews. Let there be no mistake about it. Jews were murdered at Auschwitz because of anti-Semitism. But anti-Semitism itself did not die at Auschwitz. It remains the bloodied canary in the mineshaft of global evil, an assault on our common humanity, toxic to democracies. And so in combating anti-Semitism, we are protecting and defending our common humanity. We are defending and protecting our rules-based international order, our democracies. The third is the danger of state-sanctioned incitement to hate and genocide. As the Supreme Court of Canada put it, the Holocaust did not begin in the gas chambers, said the court. It began with words. These are the chilling facts of history. These, as the court put it, are the catastrophic effects of racism. And so the importance and imperative, therefore, of combating hate and incitement and discrimination. The fourth is the fourth danger, the proliferation of Holocaust denial and distortion, of Holocaust minimization and trivialization, of Holocaust inversion, as in the comparison of Jews to Nazis, and in the contemporary and cruel trope where Jews, the Jewish people, Israel, are accused of manufacturing the COVID virus, of causing its spread, and yet in another trope of profiting from it. And so it's our responsibility to expose the bearers of false witness, to unmask the deniers of Holocaust memory, to protect the facts, as the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance also reminds us again and again, so that we thereby not only protect truth, we not only secure memory, we also protect our international community. Fifth is the danger of silence in the face of evil, where silence always means incentivizing the oppressor, where silence means coming down on the side of the oppressor, not on the side of the victim, coming down on the side of the tormentor, not on the side of the tormented. And so it is our responsibility always to protest against injustice, to stand up and be counted, and not look around to see whoever else may be standing before we do so. Because in the world in which we live, there are too few people who are prepared to stand, let alone to be counted. Number 6 is a danger of indifference and inaction, as in the Holocaust, and for example, also in the genocide of the Tutsis, and I can give other examples, but where with respect to the Tutsis, 10,000 Tutsis were murdered every day for 3 months amidst indifference and inaction. And so what makes the Holocaust and the genocide of the Tutsis and other mass atrocities so unspeakable are not only the atrocities themselves, and I make no analogies ever to the Holocaust, but what makes all these mass atrocities so unspeakable and the Holocaust so unspeakable is that all this was preventable. Nobody could say we did not know. We knew, but we did not act. From mid-May to the beginning of July 1944, where no one could say we did not know, 440,000 Hungarian Jews were deported to the death camp Auschwitz, the cruelest, most efficient, deadliest killing field in all of the Holocaust. Raoul Wallenberg arrived at the Swedish legation in Budapest in mid-July 1944, and with a mixture of ingenuity and inspiration and bluff and bravado and mobilizing all those there with him, saved 100,000 Hungarian Jews. And so what the whole international bystander community did not do with its indifference and inaction, Raoul Wallenberg teaches us what one person can do. 7th is the dangers of cultures of impunity. If the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century can be characterized as ages of atrocity, they're also the age of impunity. Few of the war criminals have been brought to justice. There must be no sanctuary for hate, no refuge for bigotry, and no immunity for these hostis humanus generis, for these enemies of humankind. For impunity only incentivizes further aggression and criminality. Number 8, and moving to a close, is the trahison des clés, the betrayal of the elites. Nuremberg crimes, in a word, were the crimes of the Nuremberg elites, of doctors and scientists, of judges and lawyers, of teachers and educators, of church leaders, engineers, and architects. Our responsibility, therefore, is always to speak truth to power and to hold power accountable to truth. Number 9 is a danger of the vulnerability of the powerless and the powerlessness of the vulnerable. The responsibility, therefore, to give voice to the voiceless and to empower the powerless. In a word, the test of a just society is how we treat the most vulnerable amongst us. A lesson taught to me most compellingly by my daughter Gila when she was 15 years old, now 42 years old, when she said to me at the time, "Daddy, if you want to know what the real test of human rights is, always ask yourselves at any time, in any situation, in any part of the world, is it good for children? Is what is happening good for children?" May I, at this point, close with a word to the survivors and what I have learned from you. For you have endured the worst of inhumanity, but somehow found in the resources of your own humanity the will to go on, to build families and relationships, and to make enduring contributions to every community, such as in Winnipeg, in Western Canada, and internationally, to make enduring contributions to every community that you inhabit. We are all your beneficiaries, and we will continue to be inspired by your teachings and by your example, as well as you have often told me, including when we were together on visits to the death camp Auschwitz, that it's not the case that if there had been no Holocaust, there would not have been a state of Israel. Rather, it's the other way around, that if there had been a state of Israel, there would not have been a Holocaust or many of the horrors of Jewish history. If there had been an indigenous homeland for an indigenous Jewish people throughout history, we might well have been spared the worst horrors of history. Not only the Jews being spared, but all those caught up in these horrors in the international community. And so, together with you, we must remember and pledge that never again will we be indifferent to incitement and hate, that never again will we be silent in the face of evil, that never again will we indulge racism and anti-Semitism, the most dangerous of hatreds, that never again will we ignore the plight of the vulnerable, and never again will we be indifferent in the face of mass atrocity and impunity, but we will speak up and we will act against racism, against hate, against anti-Semitism, against mass atrocity, against injustice, and against the crime of crimes whose name we should even shudder to mention, genocide, which you singularly and painfully experienced, and from whom we draw the existential lessons of Jewish history and human history that we have to both learn and act upon. And so may this evening be not only an act of remembrance, which it is, but may it always be a remembrance to act, which it must be, on behalf of our collective and common humanity. Thank you.
Such inspiring words. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Peter Flagel, Director of the Federal Government's Anti-Racism Secretariat, who's flown in from Ottawa in order to join us tonight on this special occasion. Mr. Flagel has had a distinguished career as a social entrepreneur, fundraiser, columnist, community organizer, and musician, with extensive Canadian and international experience working in multilingual and multicultural settings. He has a history of leadership in the government, NGO, and philanthropic sectors in areas including diversity and employment, human rights, anti-Black racism, Indigenous issues, homophobia and transphobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, youth culture, and multiculturalism.
Thank you very much. And I must say that it is quite daunting to speak directly after the inspiring Honorable Erwin Cotler and his profound words, but I will definitely try. So the Honorable Anita Neville, the Honorable Andrew Smith, members of the legislature, Deputy Mayor Beljarnowski, distinguished guests, chers amis, good evening. Good evening, everyone. C'est vraiment un plaisir pour moi d'être avec vous ce soir. J'aimerais vraiment remercier les organisateurs de m'avoir invité. But let me begin by saying how pleased I am to be back on the land of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Oji-Cree, the Dakota, and the Dene peoples, and of course, the historic homeland of the Métis Nation, otherwise known as Winnipeg. As we are constantly reminded of the shameful history and legacy of the Indian residential schools, it is our duty of truth and reconciliation to constantly and consistently acknowledge the sacred land upon which we stand and work to repair the injustices First Nation, Inuit, and Métis across Turtle Island continue to face today. I must be honest, being back in Winnipeg brings back fond memories of working closely in one of my past lives with local youth and arts groups to help advance change with and for young people facing the scourge of social exclusion, prejudice, and lack of opportunity. But today, as Executive Director of the Government of Canada's Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks and congratulations to Bell and the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada for successfully reopening the Freeman Family Holocaust Education Centre. So please let us give them a warm round of applause. Seemingly unfazed by the unexpected, the tumultuous, and the largely tragic headwinds of the COVID-19 pandemic, your organization, Bell, spread its creative and determined wings to successfully gift Winnipeg, and dare I say, our entire country, with a unique, newly augmented Holocaust museum. And if I may, I would like to take a moment to dwell on the uniqueness of this museum. As if living and breathing the motto, nothing about us without us that is for us, the Freeman Family Holocaust Education Center has been particularly intentional in ensuring that all the artifacts in the exhibits are from local Holocaust survivors and their families. In this, over the years, you have reached out to survivors, you have engaged them in dialogue, and you have persuaded them of the transformative power of their stories to touch hearts and to change minds at a time which is particularly germane today, in which anti-Semitism is at an all-time high. Your empathetic grace and understanding that you've conferred upon these unsung heroes is reflected in the trust they have placed in you to allow their stories to be told and displayed for all to hear and see in this museum. And in a true spirit of critical pedagogy, you have opted to help visitors grasp how the experiences of local Holocaust survivors are inextricably linked to those of survivors living in many corners of the globe. And you're doing so by offering those who will rediscover your museum direct access to more than 55,000 video testimonies of survivors and a list of 1.9 million searchable names through the University of Southern California Shoah Foundation's Visual History Archive. Incredible. Moreover, with a projection of the names of all survivors who settle in Winnipeg at any time, over 1,000 women and men, you are helping to put a human face on the unfathomable strength, the resilience, and the determination it must have taken to survive one of the greatest crimes humanity has ever known. And as if that were not enough, the renewed museum is also disrupting some of the lingering myths about Canadian multiculturalism. And you're doing so by drawing attention to the extent to which anti-Semitism was woven into the colonial project here on Canadian soil. You're doing so with exhibits touching on the mistreatment of Jews before, during, and even after the Holocaust in Canada. And so through this, you're pushing the envelope, offering, among many other things, inspiration to the museal community and the broader cultural community, some of whom still struggle to this day with the idea that our cultural institutions, or museum thinking and practice, can and should be forces for good. And that the idea that explicitly and unabashedly taking on inequalities with the aim of igniting social change is not an abdication of cultural responsibility, but in fact, it is a fulfillment of the role of the artist, the role of the creator, and the role of the curator writ large. And from the perspective of the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat, this is paramount. For we are living in a time in which Holocaust distortion and denial are at an all-time high. We are living in a time in which anti-Semitism is being mainstreamed. And we are living in a time in which Jews in Canada are the religious group most targeted by hate crimes. So for over the last 2 years, we were all forced to experience a pandemic in which, on the one hand, we saw the proliferation of online and offline disinformation, blaming the state of Israel in general and Jews in particular for somehow concocting and then spreading COVID-19. On the other hand, we have witnessed online, but also very visibly in our streets across the country, people equating public health ordinances, irrespective of whether you agree with them or not, with the horrors that was the Holocaust and other Nazi atrocities. We have also seen how some celebrities with millions of followers, Kanye West, if I can, jumped on the anti-Semitism bandwagon, not only minimizing and denying the Holocaust, and at the same breath, the transatlantic slave trade, but also giving star power to the weaponization of some of the most insidious anti-Semitic tropes out there. This, it bears mentioning, appears to be inextricably linked to a broader effort to instrumentalize other forms of hate with the aim of dismantling and dismembering democratic institutions, the rule of law, human rights, and substantive justice upon which the bare minimum of the protection of our rights and freedoms depend. That is why, for us at the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat, it is impossible to consider the fight against anti-Semitism in isolation from the fight against all forms of racism. It is for us impossible for us to fathom excluding the discrimination, the fight against the discrimination, the prejudice, and the hate faced by Jewish communities across Canada from our efforts to eliminate racism in Canada and abroad. In fact, Canada's anti-racism strategy is unequivocal. Anti-Semitism is a form of racism, and it must be combated as such by the Government of Canada. We are persuaded that we must stand together to reject those who seek to fan the flames of divisions among peoples and communities who bear the brunt of racism, discrimination, and hate. Since our inception in 2019, the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat has been resolute in our commitment to combating anti-Semitism. We have convened town halls with Jewish community leaders on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on communities. We have organized the National Summit on Anti-Semitism, co-hosted by the Honorable Erwin Kotler, and we have offered seminars on anti-Semitism within the public service and acted as a bridge connecting Jewish community leaders to the policymaking process in different federal departments. But we recognize that we cannot do this critical work on our own and that much more work needs to be done. We depend on and actively support organizations like the Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada, whose work in this case of revitalizing Holocaust education and remembrance remains paramount in the Canada-wide struggle against racism in general and anti-Semitism in particular, especially for the younger generation. So if I may, I would like to close by sharing a personal story, a personal testimony, by telling the story of someone who has always held a special place in my heart, my grade 2 English teacher, Shirley Perlman. She was part of a family of Holocaust survivors who was the first instructor I ever had that taught Black history in the classroom. I can remember it to this day in my grade 2 class as a young Black child himself suffering from the sting of racial prejudice and hate from my classmates, sitting wide-eyed in class, learning about the Underground Railroad and the transatlantic slave trade for the first time. It was a transformative moment for me. She was unashamed about being Jewish, and she spoke quite passionately about the parallels and similarities connecting the Jewish experience of oppression with the Black experience. And that lesson, which profoundly marked me, I carried through my adolescence and young adulthood as an activist for whom fighting anti-Black racism went hand in hand with fighting anti-Semitism. And I regularly spoke and continue to speak about the importance of Holocaust remembrance in our society. So as we approach January 27th, the International Day of Commemoration and Memory of the Victims of the Holocaust, I must stress that this is the power of Holocaust education for all generations. It is the power to preserve and honor the memory of the victims of survivors of the Holocaust. It is the power to remind us that even in the midst of the most progressive societies, many of us are susceptible to falling to the siren call of anti-Semitism and other forms of racism and discrimination. But it is also the power to remind us of the resilience and the determination of Jewish communities in the face of the horrors of the past, and to point us towards our individual and collective responsibility to do better for the future. So never again for a better future. We would like to walk down that path with you. So in the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat, not only do you have an ally, you also have a friend. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Flegel, and thank you for the incredibly important work that you and your team does. It is so essential that we continue this together and in partnership. Next up, I'm very pleased to welcome the Honorable Andrew Smith, Manitoba's Minister of Sport, Culture, and Heritage, who brings greetings on behalf of the province. As an MLA, Mr. Smith has immersed himself in the many diverse cultural communities and organizations in his constituency and, of course, in the province. And we at the Jewish Heritage Center thank the province for their ongoing support, not only for this important project, but every year and for many other individual projects.
Good evening. It's a tremendous honor to be here tonight on behalf of my colleagues at the Manitoba Legislature and, of course, our Premier, Heather Stephenson. I know we've heard from a number of speakers tonight about, first of all, from the Honourable Erwin Kotler, the horrors of the Holocaust. And, of course, we have a number of survivors here tonight. And to them I say, thank you. Thank you for teaching us. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. I know the experiences that you had cannot have been easy, and nobody would be able to understand the experiences that you went through. But know this, that your stories and your experiences that you've shared with us, it's our responsibility as another generation and future generations to continue sharing that. If you look around the room here today, there's a number of us here from all age demographics. But our hope is that after all of us are gone, including myself, that there will be a similar gathering like this with the future generations discussing the Holocaust. Not only the survivors, not only the evils that led up to it, but the lessons learned. And I think a few lessons learned that were outlined by the Honourable Erwin Kotler this evening. If that's the case, I think we can say we've been successful as a society. A few years ago, before COVID, it was in 2017, my wife and I had the opportunity to visit Auschwitz and Birkenau. And I think there's nothing more powerful than witnessing or visiting an institution just like that. Going through each building that's been largely kept intact from its original formation not only sends a chill down your spine, but it also gives you a visual representation of what evil can be. And I know we've made tremendous progress over the last 80-some years, but it's been mentioned tonight that even some of the most progressive societies are not immune to hate. So, to the future generations, younger than myself, I think it's your responsibility, it's our responsibility to continue to tell the stories of our survivors, to understand not only the horrors of what happened in places like Auschwitz, but to understand the lessons learned from it, and how we as a society can prevent something like that from happening again. So as the Minister of Sport, Culture and Heritage, I know how important that it is in a diverse culture to understand that we as Manitobans and we as Canadians have a collective responsibility for the Jewish community and the greater community to make sure that hate like that does not transmit from us, from any of us, to any community, whether they are based on a gender, whether it's based on their ethnicity or their religious affiliation. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I do look forward to seeing some of the art later today, and I hope that some of the younger generation, younger folks here tonight, get to do that and understand just what some of the folks, some of our survivors here, had to endure some 80 years ago. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you very much, and I should add that we in our community are looking forward to marking Jewish Heritage Month in May for the very first time, which was announced by the province last year on May 31st. Janice Lukes, the Deputy Mayor of Winnipeg, will now bring greetings on behalf of the City of Winnipeg. Ms. Lukes has held the past and current role as Chair of Public Works, Acting Deputy Mayor, and now Deputy Mayor. And through her extensive travels and work within her very diverse ward, she continues to experience, help navigate, and celebrate the many challenges and opportunities related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're so happy to welcome her here tonight.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here today, this evening, and to bring greetings on behalf of the City of Winnipeg, of Mayor Scott Gillingham, and our City Council colleagues. I'd like to welcome and thank you, Your Honor, and dignitaries, and all the guests and youth here this evening. I had a peek at the renovations. Beautiful. The renovations are a testament to the importance of the Holocaust education and the power of community. I'd like to thank the Freeman Family Foundation, the generous donors, granting organizations, the many contributions from individuals of artifacts, and generous support which has made this renovation possible. As we stand here today, it's important to remember that the Holocaust is not just a tragic event in the past, but a stark reminder of the ongoing threat of anti-Semitism and hate crimes. We must continue to educate ourselves and future generations about the atrocities of the Holocaust and work tirelessly to combat discrimination. And through this incredible renovation, we can see continued that this is happening. The new technology that's been added to the center, including the interactive displays, will really help to engage younger people and make the stories of the more than 1,000 Holocaust survivors who made Winnipeg their home after the war more accessible, more relevant, and truly more of an intimate and touching experience. One of Winnipeg's greatest strengths is our diversity. The ward that I represent is one of the fastest growing and most diverse parts of the city, and I feel really blessed to be able to work with so many new Canadians who want to grow their families and careers here and are eager to contribute to the larger community. This is a priority of the City of Winnipeg. We are laying and building the foundations through our newcomer welcome and inclusion policy, our Human Rights Committee of Council, and the City of Winnipeg's long-term commitment plan on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and anti-racism, just to name a few of the initiatives. As we continue to attract newcomers from around the world, it's critical that we all promote the ideals of inclusivity and respect for all individuals. I know the representatives from the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg had the opportunity to meet with Mayor Gillingham last week to discuss how we can work together as a community to fight against racism and encourage even more immigration. The ongoing dialogue is so important, and the door is always open. In closing, I'd like to thank the Jewish Heritage Education Center for their dedication to sharing the stories of our Jewish community and for providing a space, a beautiful space, for us to gather and learn and reflect. Together, we can ensure the lessons of the Holocaust are never forgotten as we continue towards a more just and equitable society for all. Thank you for the beautiful, beautiful work and effort you've done. Thank you.
Well, Candace Hogue is our guest curator for the renewed Holocaust Education Center. And Candace has a background in fine arts and museology and has worked as a museum consultant for almost 30 years in the Manitoba heritage community, working to elevate and interpret our collective histories in provocative and honest ways. Her extensive work has included exhibit and interpretive planning, exhibit design, and curation. She has guest curated multiple exhibits for clients such as the St. Boniface Museum, the Manitoba Museum, the Winnipeg River Museum, and the Kisikawan Sharing Lodge. Candace is currently working as the curator for the future Red River Métis Heritage Center, which will be located at Portage in Maine. She's here tonight to remark on her role in curating the exhibition in the Holocaust Education Center. And I want to thank her again. It is always, we have worked on many exhibits together at the Heritage Center with Candace, and it is always such a pleasure to work with her.
I want to see you when I'm talking. Good evening. I want to start by quickly acknowledging my fellow speakers tonight, and in particular want to thank our keynote speakers, the Honorable Erwin Kotler and Mr. Peter Flegel. As Belle said in her introduction, I am the guest curator of the Holocaust Education Center that we are about to reopen very shortly this evening. And I'm far more interested in you seeing the new space and my sharing it with you in that way than I am just talking about it. But I thought I would try and share a few words about the project's overview and what the vision was for the renewed center through my curatorial lens. I began my work on this project in July of 2021. The last update of the space had been done in 2009. So 12 years later, early discussions for this latest incarnation began around my being asked to refurbish and refresh what had now become a tired space. Well, it took only a few minutes, few meetings and conversations with Belle Derneski before it became more than clear that this time around, this long overdue project in this perhaps more important now than ever space had greater needs that went well beyond merely just replacing the ill-fitted exhibit cases, the lifting artifact labels, and a fresh coat of paint, which of course we did that too. So some key goals were identified. Goal number one, much had changed in the world since 2009, as we have been hearing and know, not change in a positive way. Today, the continuing rise of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial and distortion is threatening our very preservation of that memory, truth, and justice. The existing exhibits were not only outdated in how information was being presented, but in addition, no longer served the current identified programming needs of the Holocaust Center. Room needed to be made to broaden the education around anti-Semitism, providing a space for truthful understanding side-by-side continued Holocaust education. Goal number two, we know more and more of our first-generation survivors are being lost each passing year. So the ongoing original commitment to continuing to honor and preserve treasured remnants of our local survivors would remain steadfast, but with an updated narrative that would bring their stories, voices, and names to the forefront and surround these newer, broader conversations. This goal would remain paramount to ensure no visitor to the center forget the event and people that the space was originally created to honor. Lastly, the center wanted to add new technologies where possible and affordable to allow as much access to information as possible and engage younger visitors. So how we got there, or here, Cole's Notes version. Some of the current historical information provided in the current text panels was no longer accurate, and some of the language that was used was no longer politically correct. Replacing and updating the texts was a no-brainer. Thank you, Belle, for rewriting those texts. To meet the needs of the shifting education and programming of the Holocaust Education Center, the space needed to reflect important, broader education around anti-Semitism, both historically, pre-Holocaust, and today. It is impossible to understand the tragedy of the Holocaust without looking at the millennia-old history of anti-Semitism. To provide context for the Holocaust within the history of anti-Semitism, new texts were written. Once again, thank you, Belle. Anti-Semitism in Canada was identified as important to include, which is a reflection of today's overdue collective responsibility as a country to recognize and tell our nation's not-so-proudful historic truths. Visitors are now introduced to what is anti-Semitism and life before the Holocaust exhibit before you move through the boxcar doors to enter the center's main space and into where the Holocaust timeline begins. Unique to visiting this Holocaust Education Center is the opportunity to see exhibited artifacts, documents, images, and the words of our local survivors and their families. Unlike how they were previously exhibited, these precious, rare collections have also been spread out through the space and within the context of the Holocaust to provide a more fluid and better understanding of our survivors, their families, and their individual experiences. I have read many testimonies. Every survivor's story of their pre-Holocaust life, Holocaust experience, liberation experience, and post-Holocaust life is unique from one another, yet they are bound by not only a shared collective tragedy, terror, and loss, but also you will undoubtedly find by an incredible and amazing resilience and strength. In further recognition and tribute, all local survivors, and we've heard about this, and their families' names now appear in a poignant projection, allowing us the opportunity to honor all of our survivors, many for whom we may have only the names. On the technology side, there is the new interactive table that allows discovery and a much deeper dive into the stories and archival holdings of the center, in addition to the station that provides access to the Shoah Foundation database that we've been hearing about of Holocaust survivor stories. I need to, at this time, thank the professional production team who were a part of this valuable project. Davi Pavlito for his quality craftsmanship in the fabrication of new display cases, graphic designer Kaylin Harrison for rising to the challenge of managing to fit it all in so beautifully. William Chung at Sentable Printing, Rob Baker and his Packmark team, and Jeremy Choi from Pattern Interactive for their dedication to quality and making things right. Conservator Ellen Robinson, my partner extraordinaire, who really pushed me to the finish line on this one. The handling of these treasured artifacts, documents, and images to ensure their preservation could not have been in more capable hands. Ellen never fails to understand my vision, knows exactly how to make it happen, and makes it all look too easy. Internally, thank you to Asper Campus staff, Israel Benoon and his team for their assistance, Archivist Andrew Morrison and Director of Programs and Exhibits Stan Carboni of the Jewish Heritage Center for all their support of locating and scanning images and finding information when I needed it. And Belle Jarneski, where are you? I gotta be, come out of here. I am so grateful for all your trust and support throughout this project. We both shared a vision of a space that would acknowledge, honor, pay tribute, and tell the stories of this community's survivors in a respectful, dedicated space for current and future generations. Your dedication and commitment to Holocaust education and your continued fight against anti-Semitism is inspiring. What an amazing legacy Samuel and Sylvia left behind to us. The changes made in many ways were subtle and, I hope, impactful. I believe we accomplished what we set out to do, and that the space will now allow you to engage visitors in critical engagement and learning with endless programming potential. Last year in 2022, the federal government made a change to the criminal code to outlaw Holocaust denial, and millions of dollars are being invested in much larger Holocaust museums throughout Canada. This is very telling and demonstrates how critical the times we are currently living in are. The Holocaust Education Center and our budget here are significantly smaller, but I believe we are a good example of how all our communities and organizations need to participate in as small or large a way possible in this ongoing, worse than ever historic battle. My final guiding words when visiting: this space holds the remnants and stories that are the witness to an unspeakable atrocity. It is a quiet space that cradles and protects its delicate small objects, cherished images, gentle writings, and stark, often clinical documents. Listen carefully to them. Feel inspired by the strength of the individuals that endured such horror, and take away with you a stronger, renewed understanding of what the results of systemic hatred, propaganda, and non-action can be and must not be ever again. Thank you.
Our final speaker tonight is a very special person, an extraordinary human being. Edith Kimmelman will be representing our survivors tonight. She is, of course, a Holocaust survivor. She was an educator, a school administrator, and she has shared her stories, her own story, to thousands and thousands of students throughout the years. And I invite her to come up now to speak to you.
I hope not to make the same mistake twice and fall. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Belle, and the Jewish Heritage Center for inviting me to represent our Holocaust survivor community. I think I'm getting a little bit shorter. And thank you for the flattering introduction. I'm honored to be part of this evening's significant event. I'm heartened by what you and your team have accomplished. For me, it is a positive indicator of a continuing future and support for renewal and new visions. After listening to the eloquent remarks of the prominent speakers preceding me, perhaps I should just express my thanks and sit down. You are fortunate that I am the last one to speak, I can still remember quite well from my years in education the attention span of students and the last period of classes. Thankfully, we do not have a large clock facing us on the wall. I have spoken about my traumatic experiences in the Shoah to students and the general public for over 50 years, and I'm still unable to emotionally separate myself from that tragic period. When speaking, my primary objective has always been to convey to the listeners the perspective of a 6-year-old Jewish child during the living nightmare of the Holocaust. My history is quite well known to many here and easily accessible. This evening, my focus is on addressing everyone younger than I, which most of you are, but especially to the second, third, and fourth generations who are many, many decades away from the Second World War. I would like as well to include the incoming new Canadians who are just like I was when I arrived here in June of 1949. We, the remaining Shoah survivors, are rapidly declining in number. Few of us remain capable of clearly articulating our thoughts or have the resilience to publicly recall and thus relive our tragic past. We were silent for many years before we could muster our courage and power to share with you the experiences of having lived through the Shoah and survived. At this stage in my life, I'm appealing to our younger generations. You are young, knowledgeable, strong, well-educated, and powerful. I urge you to undertake and engage in tikkun olam, the improvement of the world. In today's world of instant communication, you possess the ability to use it for positive results. Choose wisely, be vigilant and proactive against hatred, bigotry, injustice, and anti-Semitism. For unless you are willing to undertake this very daunting task, history may repeat itself. It frightens me to see the many changes which have lately occurred, except for the total faith that I have in you to bring about a better world. I wish you success in your endeavors. To the incoming new Canadians, my message is simple. You have come to a free, democratic country. Embrace, cherish, and protect it. I arrived here at age 14 with nothing. All I possessed was 8 years of baggage with tragic memories. The loss of my parents, family, home, and country left me with an indelible imprint of trauma that I contend with till today. However, I did not allow it to deter me from seeking a better future for myself and my own eventual family, and I succeeded. Canada allowed and enabled me to realize my dreams, maintain my identity, beliefs, and culture. I'm a loyal and dedicated Canadian. I will surely be much, much happier to hear that the same you will be able to accomplish. I have faith in your abilities, as I had in mine, to achieve and attain your goals. In conclusion, I would like to quote a very brief passage from the January 10th Free Press editorial article. It expresses my feelings better than I can. Quote, "Vigilance is no longer enough. Democracy must find and fully employ whatever means are required to counter the nefarious tactics whose growing popularity among autocrats is solely based in the simple fact that it can work." You are the future torchbearers for peace. Use your personal torches to enlighten others. I wish you all much success. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith, and thank you to all our survivors, to whom we make a solemn promise to preserve your legacy and your contributions through education and commemoration in all the years to come. Before I say goodnight and invite you to the reception and to explore our museum, those of you who can fit in tonight, I want to end with some solemn words of the well-known Israeli historian Yehuda Bauer, who said recently at our IRA plenary in Sweden, he reminded us that we do not live in a post-Holocaust world. Sadly, we live in a world where the Holocaust is possible. And so we must go on with our responsibility to educate. I'm happy to tell you that we already have reservations for schools that will come in for presentations in our new center, as well as groups of teachers. And this is something that we will continue to do. We know that you have given so much, the survivors, so many presentations. We know how painful it is for you to share your stories, and we will carry on with telling your stories and educating future generations. I want to thank everyone who has spoken tonight, everyone who has participated in this wonderful project, and thank you to all of you who have come here tonight. Good night.